Hello and welcome to the lecture of International Business Environment. In this lecture, we will going to have a discussion on Block 2, Unit 6, International Investment. In Block 2, as we will going to discuss about all the globalization concepts and their processes and forces. In Unit 6, we will going to have a discussion about the international investment. As we comes to already have an understanding about what international investment is, so today's topic to be covered are the trade related investment major, that's TRIMS, sectoral distribution of FDI, cross border mergers and acquisition. After having the understanding of TRIMS, we will move to the MIA concepts, that is Multilateral Investment Agreement. In this Multilateral Investment Agreement, we will going to have a discuss on argument in the favor of comprehensive multinational framework, various measures for the considerations of MIA, incentives provided by the government, Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, that is MIGA. So now, again, yes, what is international investment? International investment is when there are the investment done by the foreign countries. That is, in one economy, when foreign country invest their finance or invest certain production activities or have operations in that particular country, that will lead to the international investment. These international investments gives the idea about the foreign direct investment, that what is how much money was acquired, how many companies are performing in the particular nation, and how much tariff they were on, subsidies they were on. So these kind of type of FDIs are there in that particular foreign direct investment. So जैसे कि previous session में हम लोगों ने discussions की थी कि FDI क्या होता है, international investment क्या होती है. international investment दो तरह से होती है. So now अब इस session के अंदर हम लोग कुछ rules and regulations की बात करने वाले हैं related to international इन्वेस्टमेंट की. इंटरनेशनल इन्वेस्टमेंट से रिलेटेड क्या क्या रेगुलेशंस हुई थी. सबसे पहले द ट्रेड रिलेटेड इन्वेस्टमेंट मेजर, दिस इज ट्रिम्स. ट्रिम इज बेसिकली प्रोवाइड द मेजरमेंट्स रिगार्डिंग द इन्वेस्टमेंट कि एक फॉरेन कंट्री के अंदर किस तरह से इन्वेस्टमेंट की जाएगी एंड यस किस तरह से उसकी पूरी रेगुलेशंस होंगी. दैट इज व्हाट अबाउट द ट्रिम्स. Trims are the rules that applies to the domestic regulation a country applies to the foreign investor, often a part of industrial policy. When the trade or the foreign trade is basically comes into a picture, and when after the globalization that comes into picture, that yes, we can invest, and there were the n number of investment sources, and through this the FDI earning was there for the particular company or economy, and yes, an economy can earn FPI both. So the proper regulation is required for that, proper rules are required for that. In that case, TRIMS basically state that yes, every domestic nation can apply their rules and regulations on the foreign investors. They can apply their policies, their regulations according to their requirement. They can apply all these to the foreign investors. But that's things what somewhere restrict the foreign investors, that is restrict them to perform into the very well manner. अगर बात की जाए कि yes, there was a restriction from the company, or we can say that country side. जो host country है वही कुछ ना कुछ restrictions अगर लगा रही हैं, तो ये एक restriction थी या एक barrier था for the foreign trade and for the foreign investment. And yes, at the same time कहीं ना कहीं वो international trade को भी hamper कर रहा था. And somewhere जो बहुत बार ऐसा होता था कि company used to, the foreign investor used to buy a costly material or from the very inefficient suppliers. So in that sense, yes, that thing was leads to the issues and concern. इससे एक issue और एक concern start हो गया कि how to resolve this matter, because एक safety और security trades के लिए company एक particular जो country है वो डेफिनेटली कुछ ना कुछ रेगुलेशंस लगाएगी, और उन रेगुलेशंस की वजह से हमारे जो भी फॉरेन प्रैक्टिसेस हैं, जो फॉरेन रेगुलेशंस और ट्रेड्स जो हैं वो हैम्पर हो रहे हैं. सो दैट इज व्हाई द ट्रिम्स वाज कम्स इनटू द अर्जेंसी राउंड, और उस राउंड से बेसिकली ये नहीं डिसाइड हुआ था कि किस तरह की प्रैक्टिसेस बेसिकली अप्लाई होंगी. सो दैट इज व्हाई पॉलिसी सच एज लोकल कंटेंट रिक्वायरमेंट एंड ट्रेड बैलेंसिंग रूल्स that are traditionally was used to promote the interest of domestic international. Domestic industries का interest को भी safeguard करते हुए and yes at the same time international trades को भी safeguard करते हुए TRIMS की regulations को formed out किया गया. So basically we get the idea that TRIMS help the international trades to have a easy practices in the other economy. एक अलग country में जब जाकर एक business किया जाता है तो वहाँ की regulations को TRIMS ने help किया. TRIMS उनकी regulations को solve करते हैं. Yes, it's a one of, we can say that this is the very important and name of one of 4 principal legal agreement of the world trade treaties. अगर हम world trade में जाते हैं, जब हम वर्ल्ड ट्रेड ऑर्गेनाइजेशन की ट्रीटीज की बात करें तो इनमें से एक प्रिंसिपल ये भी है दैट यू हैव टू कंसीडर द ट्रेड रिलेटेड इन्वेस्टमेंट मेजर्स आल्सो. TRIMS rules are basically yes to make them and enable the international firms to operate more easily and to have an easy practices at the international level, have a good practices. तो एक smooth practices और एक आसान प्रैक्टिसेस के लिए ट्रिम्स को इंट्रोड्यूस किया गया था. जैसा कि हमने अभी डिस्कस किया कि इसे इसलिए परफॉर्म करवाया गया या ट्रिम्स का बेसिकली कंट्रीब्यूशन इसलिए आया ताकि किसी भी तरीके की जो भी पैटर्न्स हैं जिसमें इन्वेस्टमेंट हो रही है, जो भी ओवरऑल वर्किंग्स हैं जिसमें इन्वेस्टमेंट हो रही है, वो किसी भी तरीके से हैम्पर ना हो बोथ द साइड. ना ही इंटरनेशनल लेवल पर हैम्परिंग होनी चाहिए, ना ही डोमेस्टिक लेवल पर हैम्परिंग होनी चाहिए इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड की वजह से. Now, the sectorial distribution of FDI in TRIMS, if we talk about the contribution of sectorial distribution is basically state that कौन-कौन से sectors किस तरह से perform करेंगे और एक sector से किस तरह की FDI generate किए जा सकते हैं. So that is it is reasonable that sectorial compositions of FDI matter for the trade deficit. And yes, FDI is basically make the concept to the tradabilities. Now, FDI or TRIMS contribute to increase the exports. So, किस तरह के sectorial distributions are there? So, we can say that sector-wise distribution of FDI equity inflows. That is what this is what the idea, giving you the idea कि किस तरह से sector distributions होते हैं. The construction activity having a distribution of that 21% की इनकी contribution towards FDI equity flow is 21%. Same as 8% with the computer software and hardware and telecommunications. 7% was given by the housing and constructive activity, and 21% is basically given by the service sector. So this is what the sector-wise distribution of the FDI equity inflow. So every FDI earning economy was required to consider कि किस तरह से हम लोग एक sector-wise FDI को generate कर पा रहे हैं. Now we will come to the multilateral investment agreement. MIA is basically an agreement which is signed by the large number of countries wherein the rules are agreed upon by all of them. So this is what basically having the idea कि अब हम multi level पर अगर investment करते हैं, like if we have a multi nations to invest in it, so किस तरह से और किस agreements को हम follow करेंगे, that was basically stated by MIA. So that is what considering कि large number of countries इसके अंदर involve होते हैं, they all are a member, they basically work on to bringing out standardized practices and standardized pattern in the one businesses or in one industry. कि आप जब किसी भी एक concept में काम कर रहे हैं, different nations में काम कर रहे हैं, तो आप किस तरीके की standardized practices के साथ काम करेंगे, that is what the main concept. And yes, to bringing out the effective dispute settlement mechanism is the one of the concept of it कि कैसे हम लोग minimum conflict या dispute arise करें, और अगर dispute arise होते भी हैं तो कैसे हम उसे minimize कर सकेंगे, and yes कैसे उसे control कर पाएंगे. So that is the one concept. And yes, WTO is basically considered to have to resolve that particular conflict related to the trade. So it is concerned to be the most suitable organization. अगर हम WTO की बात करते हैं तो yes, it's a one of that organization which have that effective controlling of dispute settlements, जो बहुत effectively settle कर सकता है, control कर सकता है डिस्प्यूट्स को. सो दैट्स कम्स इनटू द मल्टीलेटरल इन्वेस्टमेंट एग्रीमेंट कि किस तरह से एक तो आपके इन्वेस्टमेंट एग्रीमेंट्स होंगे एंड यस किस तरह से हम लोग उस कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स को या जो भी कंट्रोल हम लोगों को जनरेट करना है वो हम कैसे कर पाएंगे. नाउ we will going to have a discussion on the argument in the favor of comprehensive multilateral framework कि क्या क्या फेवरेट दैट मीन्स इस पर्टिकुलर एग्रीमेंट में किस तरह की कॉन्सेप्ट आए थे जिसने ये बोला था कि यस दिस पर्टिकुलर एग्रीमेंट इज गुड एंड यस इससे बेनिफिट्स ही होंगे. सो फेवर सिचुएशंस कौन कौन सी थी. द वेरी फर्स्ट इज कि इट इज व्हाट स्टेबल वन, ये एक आपकी ट्रेड प्रैक्टिसेस में स्टेबिलिटी लेकर आएगा एंड यस इट विल इम्प्रूव द कॉन्सेप्ट्स ऑफ ट्रेड. It is what predictable also and transparent, enabling the framework. It make the business practices more predictable. ये yes किस तरह से आप प्रैक्टिस करेंगे, क्या रूल्स हैं, इस रूल को फॉलो करने से इस तरीके की एक्टिविटीज एक बिजनेस से परफॉर्म होंगी. That make your business practices predictable. Growing importance of FDI is one of the another favor situation, and it would basically facilitate the growth if investment follows and their contribution to the development. And what are those statements which basically oppose to the multilateral investment agreement? The very first is the security consideration. It is what कि किस तरह से एक security flows और security consideration एक बहुत बड़ा issue था इसके अंदर. It basically the mechanism of global negotiation कि किस तरह से हम negotiate करेंगे and how we will going to resolve that negotiations. Status quo and corporate practices is one of that considerable factors which are discussed in the oppositions. Now, what are the measures related to admissions and establishment? किस तरह के measurements हैं? The very first is closely certain sectors and industries to the FDI. There are certain factors, there are certain sectors which industries also जो कि FDI से बहुत closely related होती हैं. And yes, at the same time, quantitative restrictions on the number of foreign companies in these specific sectors. So you have to consider कि किस तरह की quantitative restrictions हैं. ये measurement में ये भी बताया गया था कि yes, the company can put a quantitative restrictions on the practices. Minimum capital requirement is one of the consideration. Then subsequent additional investment or reinvestment requirement was there. Restrictions on the import of a capital good and needs to set up an investment is one. Now the multilateral investment guarantee agency. Now this is what again the extensions of AMIGA, and this was basically established by World Bank in 1988, and they basically concerned about the equity investment and direct investment flows. That means they are mainly focusing on the FPIs, that is how we will going to have an investment in the equities and what are those flows. This basically advise on designing and implementing the policies. They basically working on कि क्या policies होंगी equity investment की, किस तरह से पूरे programs and procedures होंगे उसके वहाँ investment करने के और returns के लिए and एक investment flows के लिए. So they basically MIGA basically sponsors the dialogues between the international businesses, committees and host government on the investment. So they are basically, we can say that it's in one of the sponsor of settling down all those dialogues and all those workings and issues. So that's come into the MIGA's part. So yes, this is all about for this session. So thank you so much.